Every legend has a price, paid in blood, sacrifice, and at times, in forgetting. For Theseus, the great unifier hero of Athens, the road to an immortal name would pass through the darkness of labyrinths and the hearts of monsters, leading him to glory and to a throne he won justly, only to have it torn from him by ingratitude. This is the saga of a man born of the union between mortal royalty and divine power, a hero destined to build a city's future and to face his tragic fate. Prepare yourself to hear the full story of one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. This is the saga of Theseus, the great Athenian hero. In the marble halls of the Athenian palace, where the Attic sun bathed everything in gold, Aegeus reigned. His city flourished, the markets swarmed with life, and the olive trees prospered under the watchful eye of the goddess Athena. Yet a shadow stretched across the king's heart. Though Aegeus had taken several wives over the years, he had no heir. Each sunrise brought the same anguish, worry for the future of his throne, and the deep desire for a son to call his own. The laughter of children in the streets of Athens was, to him, a painful melody that only heightened the emptiness in his palace and in his soul. Consumed by his affliction, Aegeus decided that earthly solutions were exhausted. It was time to seek counsel at the navel of the world, the place where the divine touched the mortal, the Oracle of Delphi. The journey became a pilgrimage of hope. He crossed fields and mountains, feeling the weight of his kingdom's expectations on his shoulders. Upon reaching Apollo's sanctuary, nestled on the slope of Mount Parnassus, the air seemed thin, heavy with centuries of prophecies and prayers. He entered the sacred temple, where incense smoke curled upward in spirals, carrying mortals' supplications. There, before the Pythia, the priestess who served as a channel for the voice of the god Apollo, Aegeus laid out his question with a heavy heart.
"What must I do, O great Apollo, so that my blood continues to rule Athens? How can I beget an heir to my throne?"
Shrouded in vapors rising from a fissure in the earth, the Pythia fell into a trance. When her voice finally sounded, it was not her own. It was ethereal and unsettling, delivering a riddle. "Do not loosen the prominent mouth of the wineskin, O great leader of the people, before you have reached the summit of Athens." The words hung in the air, dense and impenetrable. Aegeus furrowed his brow, trying to draw meaning from the metaphor. A wineskin? The summit of Athens? To him, the oracle had spoken in riddles, offering a stone when he had sought bread. Disillusioned and more confused than ever, the king of Athens began his long journey home. The weight of failure added to his long-standing sorrow. On the way back, the route led him through the kingdom of Troezen. There reigned Pythius, a man whose wisdom was as legendary as his long friendship with Aegeus. Seeking the solace of an old friend, the Athenian king asked for lodging in his palace. That night, under a starry sky, the two kings spoke. Aegeus, his voice choked with frustration, confessed his pain and repeated the strange prophecy he had received at Delphi. Where Aegeus saw only mystery, the astute Pythius saw clarity. His keen mind unraveled the riddle at once. The wineskin was a metaphor for Aegeus himself, and loosening its mouth meant sleeping with a woman. The prophecy was both warning and promise. The first intimate union he had before returning to Athens would result in the conception of a great hero. A golden opportunity presented itself, and Pythius did not hesitate. He arranged a sumptuous banquet with music, dancing, and above all, wine of the finest vintage. Under the pretext of celebrating his friend's visit, Pythius made sure Aegeus's cup was never empty. As the night wore on, the king of Athens, already vulnerable from his grief, was gradually overcome by drink. Then Pythius presented him with his daughter, the princess Aethra. Beautiful as the first light of dawn and with the grace of a goddess, she captivated the king's clouded gaze. Intoxicated by alcohol, and inflamed with lust at the sight of such beauty, Aegeus forgot his anguish and surrendered himself body and soul to the passion of the moment. That very fated night, while Aegeus slept a heavy sleep, Aethra was visited in her dreams. It was not a specter, but the imposing, serene figure of the goddess Athena, patron of her lover's city. The goddess spoke to the princess in a voice that was at once commanding and comforting, instructing her to go to the shore and perform a rite of offering to the gods. According to the vision, this sacred act would ensure that the child conceived that night would be blessed with a grand destiny. Obeying the divine order, Aethra rose and walked under the moonlight to the coast. The sand was cold beneath her feet, and the sound of waves breaking on the shore seemed like an ancient song. She stepped into the salt water, feeling the immensity of the sea around her, and there she poured her libation. To her surprise, the waters before her began to stir, not violently, but with a powerful, controlled energy. From the depths emerged a majestic figure, Poseidon, lord of the seas, his trident gleaming in the moonlight, and his eyes holding the force of all the oceans. Aethra fell back, awed and terrified before such magnificence. The god approached, his presence radiating primordial power. He gently placed his hand upon the princess's belly, and his voice resounded like distant thunder over the sea.
The child growing within you will attain glories to rival those of the greatest sons of Zeus. His name will be sung for generations.
In that moment, beneath the stars, the god joined with the princess. Thus fate was sealed. The son to be born from Aethra's womb would be a fusion of mortal and divine, heir to Aegeus' throne, and bearer of Poseidon's indomitable strength. The next morning, the sunlight found Aegeus sober, but with new hope. Aethra told him of her encounter with the divinity, prudently omitting the details of her own union with Poseidon, and spoke of the divine blessing upon the child that would result from that night. Aegeus was heartened, yet his joy was quickly tempered by fear. In Athens, his nephews, the Pallantids, coveted his throne and would not hesitate to eliminate any heir who appeared. Moved by prudence, Aegeus led Aethra to a secluded place where there lay a colossal stone.
If our union produces a boy, you must reveal to no one the identity of his father. Raise him here in Troezen, in safety. When he has the age and strength to move this stone, and only then, you must send him to me in Athens. With tremendous effort, he heaved up the heavy rock and placed two objects in the hollow beneath: his royal sandals and his bronze sword. Months later, a boy of remarkable beauty and vigor was born. Aethra named him Theseus. He was raised under the tutelage of his wise grandfather Theseus, who taught him the arts of war, philosophy, and governance, shaping not only his body, but also his character into that of a true hero. One day, when Theseus was still a boy, a living legend visited the palace of Troezen, the great Hercules. On hearing of his famous cousin's arrival, little Theseus and his friends ran to catch a glimpse of the hero. In the great hall, Hercules had tossed over a chair his famous mantle, the skin of the Nemean lion. To the other children, the sight of that head with bared fangs and glassy eyes was that of a real terrifying beast, and they fled screaming. But Theseus felt no fear. In his eyes, it was a threat to his home. With a boldness that shocked everyone, he snatched a sword from a palace guard's scabbard, and with a child's war cry, charged and struck at the beast. Seeing this, Hercules let out a laugh that made the beams of the hall tremble. In the boy he saw not naivete, but a spark of the heroic fire he himself possessed. Placing a heavy hand on the boy's head, he declared, "With a heart like this, Theseus' grandson is destined to have his name engraved among the stars."
From that day on, friendship and mutual respect between the future heroes took root. The years passed, and Theseus became a youth of unmatched strength and resolve. Upon turning 16, he felt the moment he had awaited all his life had arrived. He went to the great stone that had marked his childhood with a quiet mystery. Before his mother, he took his stance, flexed muscles forged by years of training, and grasped the rock. With a grunt of effort that echoed across the fields, he lifted the stone, revealing the sword and sandals lying hidden, untouched by time. He put on the sandals, which fit perfectly, and took up the sword, feeling the weapon's balance as an extension of his own arm. Turning to his mother, eyes shining with purpose, he declared, "Mother, the time has come. I will depart for Athens, and for my destiny." His grandfather Theseus, proud yet concerned, offered him a swift, safe ship to carry him by sea to the port of Piraeus. But Theseus firmly refused the offer. His gaze turned to the winding road leading north, a route rife with bandits, monsters, and dangers. What honor would there be in arriving at my father's house as a precious cargo by ship, with no dust on my sandals or blood on my blade? No, grandfather. I will forge my reputation along the way. I will reach Athens not as a lost prince, but as a new hero for those lands. And so, spurning the safety of the sea, Theseus sheathed his father's sword, bid farewell to his family, and took the perilous road by land, striding firmly to meet his fate. The young Theseus had bid farewell to his mother and grandfather and set out on his journey to Athens. He could have chosen the sea, a fast and safe route. Instead, he turned inland to the dangerous, infamous overland road that snaked across the Isthmus of Corinth, a no-man's land known as the domain of monsters and bandits. The sun beat down, and the road ahead was a promise of solitude and violence. But in his young heart, Theseus knew no fear. His first trial did not take long to appear. A massive figure blocked his path, a man with broad shoulders and a bestial gaze. It was Periphetes, the club bearer, a bandit feared for smashing travelers' skulls with his weapon. He laughed when he came upon Theseus.
"A pretty boy far from home. Hand me that sword of yours and perhaps I'll grant you a quick death."
Theseus did not answer with words. When the giant struck, bringing down a blow that whistled through the air and could have pulverized a bull, the young hero moved with fluid agility. He did not retreat before a huge adversary, but advanced, diving under the arc of the attack. Periphetes' club struck only air. Before the bandit could recover, Theseus launched a powerful counterattack, a precise, devastating punch to the giant's jaw. There was the crack of a breaking jaw, and Periphetes howled in pain, dropping his weapons. Without hesitation, Theseus seized the bronze club, feeling its weight and balance. He raised it and, with a single righteous blow, dealt the villain the same fate he had imposed on so many innocents. Theseus would carry the bronze club as a trophy and a symbol of his first victory for justice. Continuing his journey, Theseus came to Eleusis, where another challenge awaited him. There ruled Cercyon, a brutal king who forced all who passed through his lands to face him in hand-to-hand combat to the death. He was a man of prodigious strength, whose arms were like oak trunks, and he prided himself on never having been defeated. On seeing Theseus, Cercyon smiled with disdain and challenged him. The young hero was undaunted. In a ring of hard-packed earth, surrounded by the bleached bones of Cercyon's previous victims, the two faced off. The wrestler king charged, relying on brute force to crush Theseus in a lethal bear hug. But Theseus was unlike any opponent before him. Instead of meeting strength with strength, he used his skill. He slipped aside, pivoted, and used Cercyon's own momentum against him. They were techniques of leverage and balance, moves no one in that region had ever seen. Theseus was not merely fighting, he was inventing an art. Frustrated to the breaking point, Cercyon rushed with a roar of fury. But Theseus anticipated the move, seized his opponent, lifted him from the ground, and hurled him with tremendous force. The impact broke the tyrant's neck and his pride. Rising to his feet, Theseus had learned that technique and cunning could overcome brute force. There, the seed was planted for the style of wrestling that would one day be called Greco-Roman. Between his encounters with monstrous men, Theseus also faced the beasts of nature. Near the village of Cromyon, he heard tales of a gigantic boar, a creature so fierce it was said to be the daughter of the monsters Typhon and Echidna. The Cromyonian sow devastated fields and killed anyone who crossed its path. Rather than detour, Theseus saw another chance to bring peace to the region. He hunted the creature, following its trail of destruction to its lair. The battle was primal and bloody. The boar charged with tusks sharp as daggers, but Theseus's courage and precision with his sword prevailed, and the stubborn youth put an end to yet another terror that plagued the land. The last, and perhaps the most sinister, of his challenges on the road was a man named Procrustes, the Stretcher. He kept an inn by the roadside, offering shelter and hospitality to weary travelers. His welcome was warm, his smile inviting. But behind the facade of kindness lurked insane perversity. Procrustes had 2 beds in his inn, one short and one long. When a tall traveler accepted his hospitality, he tied him to the short bed. Then, with a sword, he sadistically cut the victim's legs until he fit the bed perfectly. If the guest was short, he was tied to the long bed, and after smashing his knees and elbows with a mallet, Procrustes used ropes and pulleys to stretch his limbs until they reached the ends of the bed. Sensing the malice in the host's eyes, Theseus accepted the offer of rest. When Procrustes led him to the room and prepared to subdue him, the hero struck first. With overwhelming speed, Theseus overpowered the bandit and offered him the comfort of his own bed. The villain was a tall man, and his feet extended well beyond the edge. Theseus took Procrustes' sword and imposed upon the monster his own terrible justice, ensuring he fit perfectly into his creation. At last, covered in dust and the blood of his trials, Theseus sighted the walls of Athens. His fame had preceded him. Stories of a young hero who had cleared the road of its worst terrors had already reached the city. Yet his arrival did not surprise the aging King Aegeus. In the palace, a new and sinister influence had taken root: the sorceress Medea. Having fled Corinth, she found refuge in Athens, and, with her dark arts and cunning, had become the king's counselor and consort. Medea, with her prophetic sight, foresaw the heir's arrival and knew his presence would mean the end of her power. Manipulative, she did not reveal to Aegeus the stranger's true identity. Instead, she poisoned the king's mind, already paranoid and fearful of plots. She warned him about a powerful youth coming to kill him and usurp his throne. "Receive him with honors, my king. Offer him a banquet, and toast his arrival with a cup of your finest wine. It will be a toast that solves all your problems." Aegeus, fearful for his fate, agreed. When Theseus was presented at court, the king saw only the youth's strength and the bronze club in his hands, a dangerous stranger, exactly as Medea had described. During the banquet, with a heavy heart, Aegeus offered Theseus a cup of wine, secretly laced with a deadly poison prepared by the sorceress. Theseus, honored by the king's gesture, accepted the cup. To return the hospitality, he raised the cup to toast the king's health. At that instant, the king recognized the ornate hilt of the old sword at the young man's waist. The youth before him was not an assassin. He was his heir.
No!
cried the king, in a mixture of horror and relief. As Theseus raised the cup to his lips, Aegeus's trembling hand struck the goblet, spilling the poisoned wine across the marble floor. Ignoring the court's shock, Aegeus rushed forward and embraced Theseus, weeping openly.
My son, you have finally come!
The reunion was a whirlwind of emotion. Aegeus's fury then turned on Medea, who was banished from the realm forever. That day, King Aegeus climbed the palace steps and, before all the people of Athens, presented the young hero. With a voice ringing with pride and joy, he officially recognized him as Theseus, his only son, Prince of Attica, and rightful heir to the throne of Athens. The long journey to reclaim his rightful place in the world had ended, but a new and even grander journey was about to begin. Theseus's return to Athens was an event of glory and emotion. The city hailed him as its true hero and heir. However, the joy of his arrival was quickly eclipsed by an ancient, humiliating shadow stretching from the south, from the island of Crete. Hardly had Theseus begun to grasp the duties of his new post as Prince of Attica when a ship bearing the standard of the Cretan bull put in at Piraeus. From it disembarked the emissaries of King Minos, men with arrogant faces and cold voices, who had not come to negotiate, but to collect a tribute of blood. Theseus soon learned of the outrageous debt his city paid. Years earlier, in a disastrous war, Athens had been subdued by Crete's mighty navy. The conflict had been sparked by the mysterious death of Androgeus, son of Minos, during the Panathenaic Games in Athens. Blaming King Aegeus for the tragedy, Minos imposed a crushing peace treaty. As a principal clause, every 9 years Athens was to send to Crete 14 youths, 7 young men and 7 maidens, as tribute. Their fate was the cruelest imaginable. Upon arriving in Crete, they were not made slaves or servants. They were driven like cattle into the infamous labyrinth of Knossos, a colossal structure of impossible corridors devised by the genius Daedalus. There, at the heart of that architectural darkness, dwelt the Minotaur, a nightmare creature with a man's body and a bull's head. Born of the union of Queen Pasiphae with a sacred bull, the monster was Minos' shame and weapon, and the youths of Athens were the beast's great annual feast. That year, the emissary's arrival plunged Athens into its ritual mourning. Theseus saw families torn apart, heard the laments of mothers, and felt the people's impotent rage, who, for so long, had been forced to watch their children led like lambs to the slaughter. In his heart, the fire of heroism, forged on the road to Athens, flared again with fury. He could not accept such humiliation. Before the people, Theseus stated his intent in a voice that brooked no contradiction. "I will be one of the 14. The time of our humiliation is over. I will depart with our youths, enter the beast's lair, and destroy it. And I swear by my blood and by the honor of Athens that I will return with all of them, safe and sound." King Aegeus, whose heart had scarcely recovered from the joy of finding his son again, felt a tightening in his chest. He begged, pleaded, tried in every way to dissuade Theseus from this suicidal mission. No one had ever returned from the labyrinth. But Theseus's resolve was as solid as the rock beneath which he had found his father's sword. Seeing he could not turn him aside, Aegeus, with tears in his eyes, gave him his blessing.
"Then go, my son, and may the gods protect you. By tradition, the tribute ship sails with black sails, a sign of mourning for those who will not return. But I beg you by my fatherly love, if you triumph, if you return safely, replace the black sails with white. Thus, when your ship appears on the horizon, my heart will find peace even before your feet touch the land."
With that solemn promise, Theseus departed. Aegeus watched the dark-sailed ship vanish into the vast blue of the sea, carrying off the son he had so long awaited, not knowing whether he would ever see him again. After days of a silent, somber voyage, the Athenian youths reached Crete. They were immediately led to the grand palace of Knossos, a vibrant, labyrinthine structure adorned with frescoes of dolphins and griffins. In the imposing throne room, King Minos awaited them. He was a middle-aged man whose face was the very image of power, arrogance, and an ancient, ill-healed sadness. As he examined the tributes with a cold, calculating gaze, the eyes of his daughter, the beautiful princess Ariadne fell upon Theseus. In him, she saw something she had never seen in the terrified youths of previous years. There was no fear in his gaze, only defiant resolve. In that instant, Eros, the god of love, loosed one of his unerring arrows, and the princess's heart was irrevocably captured. Ariadne could not bear the thought that this magnificent man should be handed over to the horrid death that awaited him. That night, driven by an overwhelming passion, she bribed the guards and, cloaked by darkness, went to the cell where Theseus awaited the dawn. "Eros struck my heart the moment I saw you," she confessed, her voice an urgent whisper. "I will not allow my father to sacrifice you to that infamous creature that dwells in the labyrinth." From beneath her cloak, she handed him 2 gifts. The first was a short, lethal sword that gleamed even in the half-light. Theseus felt the weapon's perfect balance, confident that with it, he could face the monster. The second was a simple, unexpected object, a ball of woolen thread. "The sword is to slay the beast," Ariadne explained, her eyes shining with intelligence. "But killing the Minotaur is only half the challenge. The labyrinth was designed so that no one ever finds the exit. This is your thread to salvation. Unwind it as you go. It will be your path back to the light." In return, she asked only for one thing: that, if he lived, he would take her with him, far from Crete and her tyrant father, as his future wife. The next day, the gates of the labyrinth were opened. As Theseus prepared to enter, Ariadne held the end of the thread with trembling hands. They exchanged a final look, a silent promise. Theseus stepped into the darkness, followed by the other 13 Athenian youths. As he walked the corridors that folded back on themselves at impossible angles, a trail of hope, the thread of wool, was left behind. Inside was a nightmare of oppressive silence and darkness, broken only by distant slivers of light. The air was heavy, fetid with the smell of old blood, and something bestial. At times, a guttural snort echoed along the walls, a sound that made the blood run cold. Floors and walls were stained with the grim testimony of previous sacrifices. But Theseus, sword in hand, felt no fear. He felt only the certainty that it would not be his blood to stain that floor red. Suddenly, from the shadows, the Minotaur emerged. It was a horrid sight, the grotesque fusion of man and beast, with a bull's strength and a predator's perverse cunning. With a roar that was half human, half animal, it lunged. Theseus's agility let him slip the surprise attack. The beast was incredibly strong. Each blow or goring could shatter stone. But Theseus was faster, a dancer of death amid the monster's fury. After dodging blow after blow, Theseus saw his opening. In a devastating counterstrike, he dove beneath the creature and, with all his strength, drove the sword into the monster's heart. A single stroke, sure and deep. The Minotaur let out a bellow of pain and surprise. Its eyes widened, and it crashed to the ground. Crete's terror was dead. Ariadne's thread became salvation. With a steady hand, Theseus wound the ball, guiding the small group of survivors out of that monument to death. The other youths, faces marked by the terror of having looked upon their own annihilation, followed him in stunned silence, scarcely daring to believe that the air they breathed was no longer the beast's fetid breath. After following the thread's entire course, at the labyrinth's entrance, like a statue of pure hope, Ariadne awaited him. She held the other end of the thread as if she held Theseus's very life in her hands. Her eyes, filled with tears now of relief rather than fear, met his at the exact instant he emerged from the shadows. No words were needed. The sight of him, covered in dust and the monster's dark blood, yet alive and triumphant, was all the answer she needed. He took her in her arms, and the kiss that followed was passionate, sealed with vows of love. But time was a luxury they did not possess, for Minos' fury would soon be roused. Together, hand in hand, they led the Athenian youths in a frantic dash through the streets of Knossos toward the harbor, where the Athenian ship, its crew eager, was a beacon of freedom awaiting their escape. The voyage home began in rapture. The love between Theseus and Ariadne blossomed beneath the stars, a promise of a new beginning. But the fates of mortals are threads in the hands of the gods. One night, while they put in at the island of Naxos to rest, Theseus received a visit in his dreams. The god Dionysus, lord of wine and ecstasy, appeared in all his formidable divine glory. He claimed Ariadne for himself, declaring that the princess was destined to be his immortal bride. Fearful of the gods, Theseus woke with his heart in pieces. He knew he could not defy a god's will. With a pain greater than any physical wound, he led Ariadne to the shore and left her beneath the shade of a tree. Back aboard the ship, he ordered the sails hoisted. The poor princess was left alone, watching her beloved's vessel vanish on the horizon. Her despair, however, was brief, for Dionysus soon came to console her. But Theseus was desolate. The victory over the Minotaur felt empty, and glory a cruel joke. Consumed by grief at his loss and by obedience to the god, he forgot the most important promise he had made, the promise to his father. The ship continued its course to Athens, still bearing the tragic black sails. Meanwhile, in Athens, King Aegeus spent each day on the highest point of the cliffs of Sunion, scanning the horizon. At last, a familiar ship appeared in the distance. His heart leapt with hope. But as the ship drew nearer, the terrible truth revealed itself. The sails were black. To the old king, that could mean only one thing. His son, his only joy, was dead. An unbearable pain seized his being, a grip so deep it stole all breath and all will to live. Without a cry, he hurled himself from the top of the cliff into the turbulent waters below. The sea that served as the king's tomb would forever after be named the Aegean Sea. What should have been Theseus's triumphant return was transformed into a melancholy event. He reached the harbor to be acclaimed as a monster-slaying hero, only to be told that his neglect had killed his own father. The people's joy was mingled with mourning for their king. Theseus, the savior of Attica, was now also its ruler. His long reign thus began not with a crown of laurels, but with a veil of mourning, a reminder that heroes' greatest deeds are often inseparable from the deepest tragedies.